Meeting on April 26, 2022. This evening we have not a loaded agenda, but a very important topic for sure, and also a reserve fund transfer. So we're doing that reserve fund transfer, a warrant article discussion, and hopefully a vote tonight. We have reserved 6:30 right before town meeting, like we always do, if we need to do any last minute discussion and voting. And if we have any public input, we'll accept that. Any updates from you? I don't know if we're approving any minutes tonight, but that's okay. And then we'll just adjourn. So as we wait a few people coming in, we can discuss a little bit about what I saw last night with the select board and some of the discussion that led up to changes to the article. I think most of you know, or if you don't, that it looks like there's going to be an over $4 million, about a $44.1 million savings by putting it up on the courts. So with the money that we've put aside, it would push us to about the $9 million mark currently. So that was good news. I did ask the select board if they were going to change the article or amend the article on the floor, potentially bringing it down from the 12 million that we had asked they move it up, bump it up to back down to 10 million. They wanted to wait on our discussion to even consider it. I think it's important that we kind of look at that really closely and how much we trust that number that's sitting out there. I know we have a little flexibility, but I think we really need to look hard at that and see if we don't want to come back. That's been our discussion. So we can kind of start with that. Any comments you guys have regarding that? That was a little more than I thought we were going to save. I was expecting 2 to 3. So
I like how you're spinning this up, Gary, as a savings. I don't see it as a savings. I see it as a $14 million spend. We've had discussions about these large capital project items in the past.
Yep.
And my concern is when you start getting over that $10 million threshold, and before it used to be more like 6 or 7 to me, but I've kind of realized that things are more expensive today. And put in a $10 million project to the town, and we've got, I'll call it special interest, and I'm not saying that it's not right or wrong here, but what I'm saying is when we get into these large capital projects, they should be voted on more outside of the levy versus inside. Doesn't mean we have to fund it outside the levy, but it really gives you a sense of what the town really wants for these large capital projects, and that's what concerns me. So when I look at that, that's the first issue that I have. The other thing is it's why aren't we looking at, and maybe we have, and I haven't heard it, but why aren't we looking at renovating the old library space? Probably could do that for $3 or $4 million and have a really nice senior center in there versus having to keep up with the Joneses, which is the library, which, by the way, for the record, I did not vote for, and have a new building and have it where it is. I struggle with that. And my concern goes beyond that financially is, and I've said this before in the last meeting, is, what about parking? Nobody really talked about parking there. I saw that there was, with the design, there was some parking kind of curled around the back of it. But is there enough? Because every time I've gone down there as of late, and there hasn't been a lot, but the few times I've gone down there as of late since the library's been built, it just seems like there's not enough parking there. And this building is beautiful. Fireplace inside, it is a cafeteria. People are going to want to go there. Every senior in town is going to want to go there. It's great. But are we going to have enough parking? And the second thing is that concerns me is we're on a track here to be 20 to 25,000 people in this town by 2040 to 2050, somewhere in that range, based on the development trends that are going on, particularly with the common area and the redevelopment of the common area. Are we sizing this thing right? I mean, it's one thing to spend $4 or $5 million to renovate an existing space. It's another thing to spend 14 million on something, and then 20 years later, like, it's too small. We need something bigger.
Thank you.
I'll get off the soapbox. Those are my points, and I'll get off.
But can we let Mr. Ansaldi in? Whoever, I don't have control, but he's been texting, asking if he can be let. He definitely has, he's been involved in all the discussions with the LLB.
I just put him in as a panelist,
There we
Gary.
go. Thank you. Good evening, Anthony. Yeah, Greg, that was kind of a whole lot more than a financial discussion, and that's probably something.
I disagree, Gary. I think it's all financial.
Well,
there was a bunch of questions there, Gary, that I'm happy to answer that.
Yeah. I think Greg has obviously some very good points, and Greg, you and I have had discussions throughout the last several years on what is that threshold when we want to, go outside the levy on these things and make the town truly evaluate this and pay for it. And we've never really been able to come up with a number. We've flirted with different percentages of the levy or whatever, but I know one project that absolutely we won't have a choice, and that would be the Shaker Lane project, as we know, the skyrocketing price. That's a slam dunk. But these projects that sit here and float between, we can use alumni as a standard. I mean, there are those that thought that shouldn't have been done the way it was. And certainly this project is discussion. A discussion can be had against that for sure. But I'm not, what I really want to discuss is the best way to finance this. I'm well aware of what's in front of us, projects coming down the road. That was the same. We knew we needed a senior center when we built a library, when we had to finance that. So this is another project. Am I concerned about what happens to this space, Shattuck Street space? Absolutely. I think Anthony can speak a little bit more to that. And I do want him to give a little bit of an intro now that he's on of some of the discussion that he's had with LLB. But Greg, those are all valuable points. And I do value a lot of that discussion, because we definitely need to have some serious conversations about how we're going to spend going forward, because we know what's coming. There's no surprises. God forbid we have an accident of some kind and we have to do something. But right now, we know what's coming in the next, I would say, 7 years. We have a very good picture of large capital projects. So we know what they are. So I do want the rest of the board to speak, but Anthony, maybe you can speak a little bit to this article. Where are we at now? Is this 20? And then
20.
I need to hear the board and really get some insight on what we want to do.
Sure. Thanks, Gary. So I'm not sure what I missed. Did you talk about the price of the new building?
I mean, if you want me to recap a little bit, I made a few notes. I watched the presentation a couple of weeks ago, and so.
Did you watch last night, Greg?
I didn't watch last night, but let me just hear me out for a sec. So what I talked about was, I was concerned about the library when it came on board and the price tag behind the library. I'm certainly concerned about this. I'm not against a senior center by any shade of imagination. In fact, I'd love to have one. But what I'm concerned about is we're funding it at 14 million and change, I believe the new number is. 14 million. And we're trying to put it inside the levy. Now, you know what's going to happen in town meeting floor. There's going to be 300 people that are going to show up that are all for this thing, and nobody else is going to want to show up because they're not going to spend all night at town meeting to vote on an article. And it's positioned pretty well within the night where nobody's going to want to stay there for more than an hour. So they're probably going to get what they want. What I'm concerned about, and I've said this before from a financial policy, is when we get over a threshold, and before it used to be in my mind somewhere around 6, 7, maybe 8 million. Now I think it's more like 10. We should be voting this stuff outside the levy. Doesn't mean we need to fund it that way, but at least it'll give us a much better indicator from the town as to what the town wants before we go spending $14 million on a pretty sizable project like this. That's the main concern that I have. I have other concerns too. I mentioned parking. What's that going to cost us in the long run? I mean, parking's a premium down there now. You build this beautiful building that that has the cafeteria and the fireplace and all that stuff in it, are more people going to show up? And now all of a sudden we got a parking issue and we got to fund a parking garage. Well, that's more money. That's a true cost that's not seen in this project, but now you got to have it because we're pot committed with this building, or these buildings, we should say, with the library included in that on the campus. And my other concern is this right sized for the next 40 years or so? Because the population is growing in Littleton, it's going to continue to grow. We could easily be at 20 or 25,000 people by 2050, easily, with all the projects that we have going on here. And I want to make sure that we're sizing this right so that 20 years from now, when the next people sitting on this finance committee are saying, well, we got to put in a new senior center because it's too small, or we got to add a wing on, or we got to go up, or whatever it is. So just want to make sure we're thinking about all those things, because it does feel a bit rushed, Anthony, and I'm concerned about that.
All right. So, all right. Thanks, Greg. And Alicia and Sean, you can jump in if I'm wrong at any point, but I think that we maintain a AAA bond rating because I think that threshold is 10%, right? You don't want to go above 10%. You want to really be under 10%. Sean, nod your head yes or no if I'm on that.
Yeah, no. So you don't want, and this goes for private too. You don't want to spend more than 10% of your, business on debt service for,
right.
S&P is going to flag that if we get to that point. Now, the important thing about this project, whether it is at, 10 million through financing or 12 million through, borrowing, whatever that amount is, it will be under the 10%, but that's it for the projects that we can do within the levy. So I know we had talked about earlier in the year about the feasibility study for the schools. So something like that would have to be outside the levy. Otherwise, we're going to be jammed up from an ops standpoint, or, or just be really up against it with the debt ceiling. So.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks, Sean. That was perfect. So, so Greg, with that, as far as the parking too, we're actually picking up 18 parking spaces that we currently have. As far as the size of the building, it's probably about 10 times the amount that space that they currently have. So we think that it's built out to, I don't know, about 25,000 in 2050. I don't know if that's a really accurate statement, but everybody's entitled to their opinions on that. But certainly I think that we built it out to accommodate the future. So another thing, as far as the cost, we're saving $4 million by switching it over from the slope site over to across from the library. You have put in another almost $2 million or over $2 million into the senior center stabilization fund. We're hoping to have the select board earmark another $1 million of ARPA money. That would bring it up to 6 and a change. We've been working with our state delegation to get an earmark. I asked for $1 million. So that could potentially be 7.3 ballpark. And then, we have another town meeting, because we're probably not going to be breaking ground until after annual town meeting next time. So, Alicia and Sean and I, we talked about having one more bite at the apple to put even more money aside. So that'll reduce our borrowing too. So, Gary and I talked about this a little bit today too. So, we could be in a situation where, we're paying $8 million out of pocket and only financing $6 million, which would be really good if that case, because that gives us a little bit more capacity. So, we're still trying to think about ways to bring down costs and not get to that borrowing, and we'll continue to work hard at that. Now, I heard you earlier say about doing something with the old library. It's just not renovating the old library space, right? Anytime you do greater than 30% of renovations, it's 30% of the assessed value. Then you have to bring the complete building up to building code. That building is completely not in building code. The elevators that we have are not even in compliance with ADA in Massachusetts. It's AAB. So to do that in sprinkler systems, you have to renovate now the entire building. And that would be an enormous dollar amount to renovate that building to make it up to code. So, we have furnaces that are going, you're talking a complete gut job of that building to bring it up to code. So, the dollar amount would, I think, would well exceed, if I had to guess, what we're going to end up paying for the senior center. The construction costs, as you see, it's just through the roof now because of COVID too. It's $200 a square foot higher than when we did a library. Then we just opened the library. Is that going to come down? I don't know. What's the new reality? I haven't seen in my lifetime prices really go down all that much. So, how much of this is a blip with COVID and not? But we looked at all those opportunities, right? We looked at the DCU, we looked at the Indian Hill, we looked at Shattuck Street and doing it, and there was just so many obstacles to that. And really, you're trying to retrofit space to meet our needs. Now you're going to have a building that's made for that purpose of providing programming for our seniors. So, I think that this is really the best option. Nobody likes to spend money, but I think that we've done a great job, our team, Sean, Alicia, and Joe, and Liz, and the architects to save $4 million. That's nothing to sneeze about. And, we'll continue to do our due diligence to look for other funding sources. You've been mute, Gary.
I laugh at everybody else for doing that exact thing. Thank you, Anthony. I do want to get into comments on that, but I know, Alicia, you also have a presentation it also has the reserve fund transfer, but it also speaks to the project a little bit, and it actually has a visual of the numbers, so we can kind of sink that into our head, and then we'll open up for a little more discussion. So if you could start that.
Is it okay if I start with the senior center, because that's what we're talking about with Anthony?
Please.
So I'm just posting up on the screen so you can see the difference in the savings and where the savings are coming from for the project.
Yeah, that was the recap of the slide from last night. So you can see it's a $4 million savings, and it's over $242 a square foot savings. And the reasons that she has there, I'm happy to talk about them if anybody has any question with it.
Yeah, as I said before, Anthony, I don't see this as a savings. This is a new project. I mean, it's great that we're looking at a better site to save a little bit of money, but the reality is this is a $14.6 million expense. It's not a savings anywhere here.
Well, I just think it's from the standpoint of the original proposal. So if we had kept the project as is, you would have been paying 18.7 versus the movement. By moving it over to more flat space, you'd be at 14.6.
Yeah.
So by changing the space of where we were going to put it, that's where we're seeing that potential savings.
Yeah, it's just a play on words here a little bit. I mean, it's a $14.6 million expense. It's what
Sure.
it is.
We asked for this.
Yeah,
Right.
it's I mean, it's a great job moving it from one site to the other, no doubt about it, but it's still a $14.6 million expense. It's not like it's an existing cost that we had. We found $4 million in savings. We're just looking at trying to save some money building the project out. We moved the location to a more desirable location.
Yeah,
And good job with that, by the way.
Yeah, it's been a goal of the select boards to create a senior center that's for our seniors, people that built the community that we all enjoy, right? These are a lot of people that have lived here and they want to stay here, age here, and all that. And I think that's a commitment to let them have space that they truly deserve.
So what I want to see, Anthony, is a liquor license so that when in 2040, when we're over 20,000 people, I'll buy you that beer.
All right, that's fair enough. We might have to go to a Scotch though or something, Greg.
Whatever you want.
All right.
And the slide before this is just actually the Article 20 that we had changed from the 10 million to the 12 million. The 5 million that we wanted to be able to expend from stabilization funds for this new senior center.
Um,
And the 1.5, I believe, for design services. So from 1 to 1.5 for design services.
Yeah.
So I would assume that we would want to reduce the borrowing. We don't need it at 12 anymore with the decrease in the cost that was presented.
Yeah, I'd like to hear some of the other board members on that one. I did bring it up last night. The select board, like I had mentioned earlier, did kind of put it back on us. They would like to hear what our recommendation is on that. I'm kind of going both ways on this. I love to have the buffer. I realize that we're asking the town for more, and there's definitely a mindset of some of the population, and to some extent me, that thinks that if you have 12, you'll spend it. But I also know that, you know, we're counting on this board and in other boards to make sure that we're still keeping this cost as low as possible. So I think it's important that we discuss it, because with the numbers that have been provided, I believe Anthony and Alicia and Sean, we've pushed this down to about 9 million. If everything just stayed the same right now with the money that we're putting into ARPA, you know, the ARPA money and everything else, it'll push it to 9. So are we comfortable with a estimate this early in the project to say it's not going to creep back up over 10? I guess that's the threshold that we need to discuss. So.
Hey, Gary.
Sure.
Gary. Go ahead, Steve.
Sure, Steve, go ahead.
Right. I guess there's two ways to think of this. Number one, and you said it, it's up to us to make sure that it doesn't get expended 100%. I mean, that's management, and that's what we're there for, and that's what the select board's there for, to make sure that the project is done correctly, but not excessively. So I you know, to say that it's there and we'll spend it, that shouldn't happen if there's oversight to the project. And we have an OPM that should hear that message.
Yeah.
Second thing,
Steve, and we also did a CM at risk too, similar to the library. So we'll have a construction manager on earlier, which actually jacked the price up a little bit, but we value engineer the project to make sure that it limits the change orders, and that's what it did in the library. So it actually controlled some of the costs. So I think that that's another good benefit in controlling and making sure that we don't have project creep on this.
Right. But the other thing, and you mentioned it earlier, Anthony, is that we're not going into the ground until after next annual town meeting. That's
my
long
estimate.
way away. No, I mean, that's what the architect said that night. That's a long way away, and costs are going to go up. They're not going to go down. This is giving us a little buffer. When you think about it, and we have the $1 million in ARPA funds that'll bring it to 6. We have next budget cycle that we could put more money into it. I mean, there's going to be excess borrowing capacity no matter what we do, whether we bring it down to the 10, whether we leave it at the 12. It becomes a management issue. And I guess I would say leave it at the 12. Give us the cushion just in case, knowing that we're going to have excess borrowing capacity that we can not utilize. That's all. We don't have to borrow it.
Yeah, and to Steve's point, whether it's 10, 12, whatever that mark is, we're just going to come back to town meeting and say, let's say it's 12 million. Yep, we're not borrowing 2 million. We're going to rescind this authorization. That goes, you know, through town meeting, it's approved, and then at the end of the year for our state reports, it's cleared. So it gives you flexibility, but it's also parameters which we would adhere to so that we don't end up in, having too much debt service as a percentage of our operating budget. So like Steve said, it's a management, priority, but it's more of a flexibility so we don't have to paper cut and keep coming back. So if it comes in at, that we actually need to borrow $10.1 million, that's okay. We don't have to have another town meeting article. Now, obviously that's not the goal, but as we know with, last year in costing this out, we were aiming for the 10 to 11 million mark all in. So we can see how costs change from year to year.
And the other thing is we haven't seen, at least we haven't seen the detail behind that $14 million number. How much of the $1.5 million design services are included in that number? So there's already extra money that's sitting there. You have to imagine that there's some design money that's in that $14 million number.
There is, Steve. You're right. So there is that extra 1 point after town meeting. There's a 1.5 right there. So we're not going to get up to the 12 million. No way.
Right. And we shouldn't. And we should probably with that cushion plus the extra opera money plus potential for next year, we should probably set our minds to in the $8 million range that we're looking.
Totally agree. Yeah, totally agree. And we need that flexibility in case, we have something else. So we still have needs. We have an old town hall that's pipes are breaking every day that we have to address. So, we don't want to get to that higher level. We want to be at the 8. So if there's another opportunity to address some other needs, we have that flexibility to do that.
Right. And to Greg's point about inside, outside the levy, we've tried that in the past as a strategy, Greg. And I think we used it once with the track. We had a outside the levy vote on the track, but we paid for it inside. And that's something that Bonnie and I made sure that we were able to do, but we wanted to make sure there was a consensus in the town for that track. And I think there was one other project that we did that way also, that we got the exclusion vote, but we paid for it inside. Since then, the select board has been pretty adamant about not funding things outside. We're going to have to take the time between now and when Shaker Lane comes around to drill it in the heads that we can't do anymore inside the levy because we're going to be sacrificing a lot of things. And that Shaker Lane project with $700,000 design number is not going to be cheap.
Oh, you're talking a $50 to $60 million project.
Yeah.
There's no way that you're getting that under the levy.
Good.
Not without having, just you have to, get rid of staff at that point.
But the same strategy that we're using, that we use for the fire station, that we use for the library, that we're using for the senior center, start building up those reserves so that when we do go to borrow, we can minimize that impact. And that has to be a strategy going forward. And we, again, need to make sure in these next few budget cycles that we're putting this money aside and we're not spending capital funds for things that shouldn't be.
Yeah, Steve, really scrutinize those capital requests, because the more that we do what we did for the senior center, the better we'll be. That we'll have some money to throw towards these projects.
Right, and through the chair to Steve, I'm hoping to get free cash certified again early so we can make early decisions.
Thank you. Let's hear from some other board members here. What do we?
Yeah, Gary, if I could, this is Tyler. I think the one thing I'm struggling with the most, right, is just, regardless of the amount, whether it's, $8, $10, $12 million in borrowing, it just feels like it's a year premature, right? We know we can't borrow, so I don't really understand or feel comfortable with a borrowing authorization being in the article just for the sake of having it when it's not something we can leverage. Just doesn't really philosophically make sense to me. So that's, I guess, my big picture thing. It's not really so much the amount. I anticipate the town's going to support it just from a financial policy and won't recommend point of view. It just seems like it's a vote that it's not actionable, so it doesn't make sense.
Okay, Gary, can I just address that?
Sure. Let me just see if we have any other comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, Gary, I just thought I agree with Steve. I mean, I think that we need to leave it at that number. Times are just too uncertain as to where we're going to go, and this will leave us, prepared for whatever is going to be. And he's right. It's it's a management issue to manage the project, to keep it as lean as we can.
Yeah.
So I just have my concern is more, well, some of the things that we've talked about, the school, the town building, things like that, right? And putting on my commercial hat, we always have a long range plan, right? We have a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan, something that puts the costs out there as when we're going to have to spend this money. And I think I'm not ready to vote on this to say yes, because I think we need to see a longer term plan of all the costs and when they're going to hit us. Because the town building right now, I mean, that's going to be a $20 million project, right? If building a senior center is a $10 to $15 million project, refurbishing the town building to get it up to code is going to be somewhere between $10 and $20 million. And then we have the school that we're hearing could be up to $50 million. So those types of things I would love to see on paper. I'm not against the senior center, but if we have to refurbish the town building anyway, refurbish it and add on the senior center to the town building.
Anthony, why don't you talk a little bit about what happened last night with the town building?
Sure. So first, to address the number 7, I think, Tyler, your point is well taken. Did we really need this? Probably not number 7, but I think the rationale that the select board take, and there's probably some value to this, is with the interest rates projected to increase, if by some chance that we're further along in the design, that we could start the project in March or February and it's a mild winter, then we could take advantage of maybe a lower interest rate and saving a lot for the town. So I think that was the rationale behind throwing the borrowing article in there now. Now, as far as the town hall, so last night, the Lupoli Companies, who is purchased 550 King Street and is doing that mixed-use development, approached the town about using Shattuck Street, existing buildings there, for senior affordable housing, low 40% AMI, and moving town hall, that they would build us a core and shell, and then we would just have to complete the inside of the build out. So, and the core and shell is pretty significant, right? That's all your HVAC, your electric, your plumbing, and all that stuff in there. Would it still cost us money? Yeah, absolutely. But to build a new town hall, we'd probably be looking at $30 million, and probably inside renovation of a new building might be $3 million. So, that's something that the select board will hear more on as more details come out. We are trying to negotiate what that might look like, but so I'm not sure that town hall remains as a town hall.
Yeah, and that definitely a lot more discussion to come on that. I'm sure citizenry will have a lot to say about how that moves forward, and a lot more details on whether we would own the property. And I know there was discussion of a nonprofit, Holy Companies would then get a nonprofit in there to manage the property as well. A lot of discussion last night surrounding that. And then there's the piece, well, how long realistically, if that doesn't happen, how long realistically can the town offices spread out in that building, obviously, which is already happening to some degree, can remain in that building? I think, are we 100 years old or now? So
I think the oldest part was built about 1932 with the school and EHS sits, so 32 or 35 around there.
it's a testament to construction for sure back then. But I think at some point we have to realize whether this discussion takes us into the town hall actually being built out at King Street, or it remaining here. Those offices, Park and Rec, school, the offices and town hall need a home. So that's a cost coming, whether it's on site or not, right? It would be nice if we had another facility that came up for sale, because there's a time when you can buy and then build out inside, which is enormously cheaper than obviously what we're seeing in construction costs right now. So, but there's no guarantees on finding, buildings and properties like that in town. So,
Gary, just just to reiterate what I said, is I think what happened at the selectmen meeting yesterday, and an article came out like a week earlier about it, because I guess it was at the planning board first when it came up, is I think that's fair. But my point is, I don't want to lose my point, is I think we are going cycle to cycle when we're looking at these numbers, and to make an informed financial decision, I think we really need to look at a longer range plan. A perfect example is the library. When that went up and running, we were surprised by the cost of utilities and maintenance because we didn't plan it out. So I think that's small in the grand scheme of things, but in the commercial space, we do long range plans, and it does change year over year. Things change, but it would be good to make an informed financial decision saying, this is what's going to happen. This is what the plan is for the next 3 to 5 years.
No, that's very fair, Al, and I definitely think we know what's coming, but the nuts and bolts of it, there's too much at play right now with it. So if we, just kind of reel this back in, focus on the senior center, this article, we have a few things that we can do, and I don't want to lose sight of that. We approve it, recommend it as is, as written. We can, and this is individual. You can abstain if you're not comfortable with some of these details. We can recommend that the select board before town meeting amend this article on the floor. That includes to bring that number from 12 to 10. It can include removing number 7 altogether until we have a better picture in the fall. That can be a recommendation from our board. Or, you vote that you're not going to support the article for whatever reasons are. And Al, Greg, everybody's brought up reasons, concerns. And if I wind back a few years, a lot of these same concerns we brought up about the library, and we're living that right now, some of the pain because of that. Some of those things were not completely thought out, but I like the idea of the move, the campus, to have this located where it is. I like the potential of seriously affordable, deeply affordable senior housing. It looks like we Liz Tretniak had given us some numbers that we look like 40 to 50 roughly Littleton seniors would be interested in seriously discounted housing that could live in that type of an environment in a building, as opposed to living in place and et cetera. These were, so, that's an opportunity that's out there. And a lot of these discussions we've had, we had this in our last meeting, 2 meetings ago, 3 meetings ago, and a lot of those things I don't think are going to be answered, certainly by next Monday night. We can only speak to this article and how we feel about this right now going forward. And that's kind of where I want to keep refocusing back in. There's a lot we can do to this article recommending. And the select board can make a determination whether they want to hear that, make changes that we recommend, or remove or push part of this article to the fall, the next town meeting.
Can I say something to one of Al's points?
Yeah, please.
There's really no difference. We're talking about, and Sean's mentioned this a few times that I've heard him, that really, $10 million number for debt service kind of is our max number, right? And he's said that a couple of times. So anything after that, we have to seriously start discussing exclusions, whether that's renovating the existing town hall, which is going to be a big price tag. Shaker Lane, which is coming down the road, is going to be another big price tag. Those things have to really be seriously discussed as exclusions. And whatever we can do to minimize those in the future, we should. So from my feeling, from this point on, there's really not much going on inside the levy unless something drastic happens with revenues. 550 is going to increase revenues a bit into the town, but there's things that we could be doing with that money as far as what the town needs to do in conjunction with the sewer system to get the center of town walkable and do things that need to be done there. So some of that extra money that's going to come in from those improvements, that's going to bump up the taxes, should be earmarked to some of those improvements because it's directly related to that. So not everything can just be said, we have this extra money, let's throw it to debt service and pay things inside the levy. Well, that's not really the way to manage things. These projects that are coming down the pike really have to be needed by the town. And if we're seriously thinking of staying at Shattuck Street and redoing that building, and a $30 million price tag comes to my mind from some of the studies I saw in the past, we really need to make a determination whether that building is worth sinking $30 million in to renovate, or getting something built for us and paying fit up costs. Big difference in those numbers. Huge difference in those numbers.
Through the chair, respectfully, Steve, I know that I'm waiting patiently right now. There is a marijuana retail shop, so we should be getting some marijuana excise money coming up, hopefully soon. So we can look at how we can start dedicating that revenue source.
Yeah, thank you, Alicia. Those are, and we have a second potential one that would be moving into town. I don't want to lose sight of that for sure, because it's kind of, if we keep the finance committee on to those revenues, eyeing that and being smart about what we do with that money, so it's not just spent on some new project or pushed somewhere else. I think it's going to become very important for us to give strong recommendations on how that money should be utilized.
Big difference whether those are recurring streams or one-time streams too.
Yeah.
Those will be recurring quarterly streams from the state.
Yeah. I mean, I know.
Well, not the HCA, the agreements with the facilities themselves. I'm thinking.
So there's two. There's a local impact fee that's in the HCA agreement that they're paying us.
Right, which
And
is
then-
one time.
Which that's the one time.
Okay.
I believe it's for a few years named in one of the agreements I read.
Okay.
And then the 3% excise tax, that
Okay.
just keeps going. So the state collects their percentage plus our 3% and then remits it to us quarterly.
Right. Just like meals tax and hotel.
Correct.
So,
Yeah.
so Alicia, do you have any feel for what that's going to look like?
I have not received a first payment yet. I'm excited about it. I'm looking for it, but I haven't received one yet, as they've just opened.
Greg, I can give you an idea of Air. Their two shops grossed in $30 million. So 3% of that is what Air is looking at in there. So granted, we're not there yet. Air was way ahead of the curve on getting their two shops in, but there's the potential that we could see from that. So that's just something to keep on the radar. And I don't want to go down the road, because these are going to be things that hopefully help, fund some of these other projects that are on our concern in the next several years, for sure.
Yeah, and I'm with you, Gary and Alicia. Thank you for that information. I think we need to keep looking for commercial growth, and this may be one of them. My only concern is as more and more of these pot shops open up, the amount of sales per store may go down, right? It just starts to get watered down, where people aren't driving as far to get their recreational marijuana. So I think, although it's a good revenue stream, my concern would be is what is that balance over time? I mean, we might be getting a nice shot in the arm early on, but those revenues may go down over time, or they may not, depending on how good their customer base is locally.
And that's where a good finance director, Greg, will be looking at that revenue stream and being very conservative in what they allow to go into the budget, just to make sure that it's a recurring revenue that we can support. Right, Alicia?
Well
You are
said.
correct, Steve. You got it.
I have a question though. If we were to eliminate number 7 altogether,
Yeah.
that doesn't provide to be able to spend the 5 million now to be continuing to bring the project forward. So we're not really going to be any closer in fall to actually breaking ground, if I'm understanding this correctly.
Yeah, Jerry, I apologize. It wouldn't be number 7 in its entirety. It would
Okay, just the borrowing.
second sentence from the 12 million on would
Okay.
be removed, and then we would be using the 5 million to get in the front side of this, numbers 1 through 6, to get us through design and some potentially break ground with that money. That is not the intent of the select board. I definitely have pushed that or pitched that to them. They're being pretty bullish about this, doing it this way.
Well, to me, that's kind of scary though, to think that you could spend the 5 million, get design and even break ground a little bit and then not have approval to continue. Then you've just spent all that money and you have nothing for it.
And
You can't award a contract unless you have a funding source. So we couldn't go out to bid and do that with just the $5 million. We have to have the full authorization.
There you go.
and that's the thing. I mean, Jerry hit it right on the head. You can't take out the borrowing authorization. Number one, if we have numbers 1 and 2 there to take possession of the house and pay $700,000 for the house, to pay for the $1.5 million for design, and then all of a sudden a future town meeting says no way this project is going to go forward, and we've already bought a house.
You'd be selling the house for sure.
Yeah.
Which we're going
But Stephen, we very consistently paid for design and then had. I mean, the only difference here is the purchase of the house, right? I mean, we've typically paid for design and then the construction or borrowing authorization at a subsequent meeting, right? So
Right. I think the house does it for me, taking the house and taking possession of a house like that and purchasing it for the amount they were purchasing it for. Yes, we can turn around and sell it, but that's another, what happens, the housing market may be coming down if there's a recession after all this inflation. I mean, who knows what's going to happen to the housing market?
Yeah, I would stick to the article as written to some degree, just because this estimate came in, something we definitely wanted to see. We know that because we know what that number is, it gives us flexibility to that 12 million now. The question is, as a board or as an individual, are you comfortable, everyone comfortable with the $12 million ask, knowing what this, what this new information represents? And that's, and if you're comfortable making a vote tonight, and I'm not, believe me, if it's not some type of a unanimous vote, or if it gets voted down in this way, shape, or form, then we maybe have some more discussion to see if we can vote on tweaking this article where we can get it to pass.
Yeah, I mean,
That's kind of
Gary, if I could, and I'll speak for myself personally, right? I mean, I'm still stuck on the timing of the borrowing authorization, right? I mean, I think we still have the opportunity to come back in fall if things are moving more quick, more quick than we've been told by everybody, right? And the timeline we've been given is we're not going to be ready for this until after the next regular town meeting, right? So, I mean, I don't think the timing makes sense, for the article as written right now. It's kind of my personal thought.
okay.
Well, when we started this whole discussion, Tyler, I totally would have agreed with that. Matter of fact, I think that's the point that Greg and I made that first night we talked about this. Why are we doing it now when we don't have to wait? But the more I thought about it, with the house in there and the $1.5 million increase in the borrowing for the design, I think we should get some consensus from the town that yes, this is what we want. And if we take out the authorization to borrow, we don't get that. That's just my feeling. That's my opinion on the thing.
Steve, I'm with you. Normally we go through this like, it's almost like playing poker where we throw a little money in the pot and we get a design going, then we throw a little more money in because we need a little more. And then, we're kind of like pot committed at some point, and then everybody just kind of votes for it because, well, we got 3 million into this project or $1 million into the project. Let's just vote it through because we don't want to waste that money. I like the way this is written here from a voter standpoint and be able to understand what the whole project and the scope of the project is. Now, if it were me, I would look at this as just trying to do the land acquisition and pushing that through, and then come back in the fall with better numbers and see whether it could be 12 million or 10 million or whatever that number means at that point, based on what's going on with COVID, and go that route. But looking at it as a whole, I think we're doing the right thing for the people that vote on this in town. But I'm not in favor of it the way it's written.
You're not in favor of this, you said?
I am not.
Okay.
Any other comments from the board? Okay, so we need, I don't think there's, judging by what everybody's said here tonight, I'm not expecting any change in your, over the next 5 days to change your mind. There's no new information really going to come in. I'd be surprised. So your idea or your thoughts are your thoughts right now. So I guess I need motion of some kind here. I don't really have anything else to say about the article. If everybody's done speaking to it, I think we're all committed to a senior center, but it's just this. I've heard timing issues. I've heard planning. I've heard there's several different reasons why you might not be okay with this article the way it's currently written. Jerry, did you have something?
Yeah, I just don't know how this eminent domain works. I know they talked about it being a friendly and they've made arrangements, but what is our obligation to, if it's, you have to put in a reason that you're doing it, and then if that reason doesn't happen, I mean, does it affect that by not having a commitment from the town to the actual project that we're taking it for? No.
No, what would happen is we own the property. So whether we rezone it
So the reason is irrelevant, really.
Well, it's not irrelevant in the sense, well, either way, we were going to resell the property. It was just going to be shaped differently, right? So I don't think that changes. I think town council knew that when this was written, that if this, I guess if that didn't happen, if that part of the article happened and then this part didn't, what would we do? We would sell the property, I'm assuming, the same way. But I don't know. I just don't know how they're tied together as far as, I have to assume this is a legally sound document the way it's written. So I know what you're saying, Jerry, but I don't have an answer unless somebody else has more
Greg,
insight.
what about the article what coming out of the article being added to the article would make you comfortable? Let's look at it that way.
Is that directed towards somebody?
Greg, I was asking Greg.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said Gary.
Oh.
I'm sitting over here like, okay, this Gary doesn't have a thought about it. No, my whole point goes back to what I talked about earlier. And it's the same thing with the library. It's the same thing with this. I don't like large articles, large expensive articles where we just have a small group of people who are really driving the bus here and trying to push it through. I would rather see this go as an article to be funded outside the levy, let it be voted on, but still we could always finance it inside, but it'll give us a real gauge to what the town wants versus 200 or 300 people that are going to show up at town meeting and vote it through. I've always felt that way with these larger articles. You get north of 10 million. I'm not talking about borrowing, I'm talking about project size. You get north of $10 million and it just makes me look at it and say, are we doing the right things by just trying to jam this inside the levy? Because it's not free. I think everybody thinks it doesn't cost anybody anything to fund it inside the levy. It's like a free way of funding. And I'm just not comfortable with that. I never have been.
I totally agree, Greg. And I mean, you've been a big proponent of this over the years, but I think with the select board's current makeup, that ship is not going to sail. I mean, it's up to them and they will not put this outside the levy.
So that doesn't mean I should still vote for it.
Oh, I'm just trying to be realistic on this. I mean, I can't speak for them, but I can certainly tell you from the makeup of the board and the things that I went through when I was treasurer with them, is they will not vote for this to be outside the levy.
Look, I get paid a lot of money to represent this town and I'm doing it.
All right, let's we're going to need a motion one way or the other.
I'll move that we recommend Article 20 as written.
All right, there's a motion.
Second.
The motion and the second. We will do a roll call vote. Let me get up my screen because I'm not seeing everybody. So hold on. All right. Sure I have everyone's visual. All right. It's been moved by Steve and seconded by Jerry. We'll do a roll call vote. Tom?
Yes.
Al?
No.
Greg?
No.
Steve?
Yes.
And Tyler?
Tyler, you're on mute.
Oh, I lost audio for a sec there. Sorry. No.
Okay. And I'm a yes. So
Got Jerry.
Got me.
Jerry, what did you have?
I'm a yes.
You're a yes, yes. And I'm a yes. That's everybody, correct? I believe we just split pretty heavily on this article, which I fully expected. So I just want to make sure that I'm getting it right. Jerry, myself, Steve, and Tom were yeses. Al, Tyler, and Greg were no's for the article as written. Okay. So the article
Right.
does pass recommendation with a split vote. What I would recommend in preparation, typically for town meeting, is everyone in the room is pretty much familiar with this. When we have a split vote, there's usually a portion of the citizenry that would like to know why. So if you were in the know, be prepared to speak to what your concerns were for sure. And as well as those of us that recommended it, we would obviously be prepared to explain why we recommended it. So just a thought. So, I don't want anyone to be surprised on town floor if they say, well, why were you guys split? I can explain it to the citizenry at the meeting, and I'll do a good attempt at it. But I don't want to take your word away, outside of, unless you're comfortable with me saying what I heard here tonight is why, reasons for that. But if somebody would like to speak to that, you absolutely can at town meeting. Okay, we've done that before. So, all
Hey,
right,
Gary, I don't have a problem if I'm put on the spot. I'll speak my mind. I'm pretty good at that.
no, thank you. And I know we all, I truly appreciate everyone's points, because every one of your concerns, I think, is all of our concerns. We all feel the same way. It's just that we all are at different levels of tolerance or hopefulness, if you will, in this process. So I appreciate everyone's discussion on it. And thank you, Anthony, and Alicia and Sean for chiming in as well, because that information is valuable. But I do want to move on. We do have a few other items, Alicia, that we can knock out.
Okay, this one is the request for transfer that I brought to the select board last night for 33,000 for fuel.
Go ahead and put it back up on the screen. Sorry, you pulled it. We were up on the screen, I think, right?
Yep. Did I put it back or is
Oh,
it
I
not?
I might not see it. Hold on.
Yeah, I can see it.
I can see it.
Now I can see it. Thank you. We're good.
Okay. So the DPW just ordered fuel for 33,000 in April, and they're going to order fuel again in June. So I'm doing a $33,000 transfer to cover their June order.
Yeah. I was familiar with this article. Some of us, I think, knew this was coming. You want to speak to why this happened, Alicia? And I think it's the increase in fuel costs.
It is the increase in fuel costs. It's more than doubled. So
There you go.
it was unanticipated. There's no way we would have known fuel was going to go up that much.
Yeah. It looks like a lot of towns are dealing with the same shortfalls. So,
Alicia and I went through this quite a bit when it first came up last week or the week before. The current budget has about, I think it was 23,000 still sitting there. And the other thing that we discussed was whether some fuel charges were being charged to the snow and ice account. Alicia said that she hadn't charged anything to snow and ice, and it's probably too late now to start switching things over. But I think that's something that we need to look at for next year, because we do reserve that $400,000 deficit funding in the budget. That's what it's there for. And if we can charge it to the snow and ice account, we should, and that could save some of the fuel charges so we don't run into this next year.
have we done that in the past, Steve?
Pardon?
Have we done that in the past?
I talked with Michelle. I do remember Bonnie doing it. I don't think Cheryl did it. And I would encourage Alicia to go look at some of the old records that Bonnie may have had as far as how she allocated it. Or whether Michelle can pull that up for you, but I think that's something we need to work on for next year is pushing some of this off to snow and ice when we can,
I guess,
because we will have a surplus on that deficit funding that we have.
certainly. I don't like losing visibility of deficits. That would be my only concern, that we can rely on that to just, okay, we've got snow and ice, let's just do it.
Well, you have to have a process, and so
Yes,
where we know when the trucks are going out, we know when they're filling up from the records of the pump.
Yeah.
So you can certainly allocate for that gas for when they go out on those nights.
Yeah.
The thing that you have to realize is we do budget, was it 200,000 inside the budget itself, and then an additional 400,000 that's
Correct.
sitting there to cover the prior year's deficit. I mean, that's something that we've done. We have to cover a budget, a deficit. Usually it's the first thing that comes out of the spending for the tax rate. So we're not spending any more of the budget because we already put those funds aside.
Right.
Anything that's excess in that deficit that we do put aside goes to the road account, so it stays within the roads. But if we have a chance to put some of this funding, we wouldn't have this, $33,000 reserve fund transfer if we had put stuff, even 15,000 to the snow and ice account, because we have 23 still sitting in the account itself. So
Yeah, I guess what I meant.
this could have been avoidable, I think.
Sure, what I meant was, by using it that way, it doesn't really let the finance committee know that we're continually running a deficit year by year. We would not have sight of that. Where
No, we would. We're going to run into a deficit, and we have to fund the deficit because we only put 200,000 into the budget.
so I don't think that triggers a mechanism for us to have to go into snow and ice, though, to pay. We don't typically get notified of that, do we? It's not
No, my thing was, I would, if you were to do it, you'd have to do it through when there's a storm. And my second issue is because of the variability with snow and ice.
Yeah.
What if we're over and we don't have enough? And then once you start a process, I have to continue with that mechanism. I can't just say, okay, it benefited us one year to put in snow and ice. It doesn't benefit me this year, so I'm not going to put in snow and ice. That's my only concern with it.
That's why I'm suggesting go back and look at how Bonnie did it and talk with Michelle and how they funded it, because they definitely allocated fuel costs to the snow and ice account.
Let's push this. Alicia, any research that we can do for another meeting down the road after town meeting, we can discuss it, because that is something that fluctuations in fuel prices, we don't want it to keep being a reserve fund transfer. I mean, granted, it is a good use of, I guess, a reserve fund, but if there's a way where we don't have to utilize it that way, if we can get into that snow and ice, let's see what that mechanism is.
The two things you can do, you can either pay some of the fuel costs out of that deficit, which is why it's there, or you increase the fuel budget itself. One of the two things, and then you continue to have a surplus in that deficit account that we have. I mean, that's why we put the 400,000 sitting there, because generally we come well under the $400,000 deficit each year.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that insight.
Sorry. It's not an easy topic to talk about, but Alicia and Sean know what I'm talking about.
A lot of gas.
Yeah, and if I may, I'll just chime in on this too. I think one of the other concerns is just to not set a precedent so that we are using that as sort of the gas bailout fund, because I mean, obviously gas prices doubled in the last year, but I think like most cities and towns, the snow and ice budget is really, we're not really budgeting for what the actual cost is going to be, hence why we have the deficit account. So I think that's part of the concern is the more we put into that, the more we cut into the $400,000, backboard there. So we really don't want to have to raise, more than that on the recap for the following year and be able to contribute that towards roads. So I think that was some of the caution that Alicia and I had in terms of allocating more money towards the snow and ice count for gas. But I mean, there's a, it's situational, but it's just that sort of the approach we had on that, but obviously open to looking into that further and seeing,
Right, when you get the next 10 months, Sean, to try and work up a methodology so that your concerns don't happen, that we're not putting so much against it that we overspend on the deficit.
right.
That's all.
And I'm hoping it doesn't snow anymore, so.
I know. All right, any other discussion on this reserve fund transfer? If not, I would look for a motion.
I make a motion to approve the $33,000 transfer.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Do a roll call vote. Jerry,
Yes.
Steve,
Yep.
Tom,
Yes.
Al,
Yes.
Tyler,
Yes.
and Gary's a yes. All right.
You want my roll call vote too, Gary?
Oh,
You're leaving everybody out.
well, the screen jumped around when we pulled out the.
I'm a yes.
So it's unanimous.
I made the motion.
Oh my goodness. All right. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. What do we have next?
Next is Article 3. We didn't have any prior year bills before. Then we were notified of 4 Massachusetts Municipal Association invoices. 3 of them were for $225, one's for $150, for a total of $825. They were for open employment listings that the HR had done prior to us getting the new HR department in. So somewhere in transition, these bills got lost, and then the MMA sent them over to us and said, hey, why aren't these bills paid? So we'll have to do a handout at annual town meeting to pay these prior year invoices.
Okay. I guess my question is, between now and Monday, you're not expecting, we could probably feel safe to vote on this, correct?
Yes, these are the only ones we've received.
Any questions on this?
Mr. Chair, I have a question, because I'm sure someone like Jerry will ask this question. We have 3 invoices for $225 and one for $150. Why is there one for $150? What's the difference? Do we know?
I'm sure it's the number of postings. If you give me a second, I believe I have a copy of those.
One probably didn't post to all the listings that we have to use. That's what I'm betting this is probably not a director level position, so it probably didn't have to post to some of the.
Okay. And not that I have a big issue here, I don't, but it'd just be nice to know it
Yeah,
for
no, good.
in case the question comes up.
Right, since it is going to be a handout, but we should be educated on it for sure.
Can you see this on the screen, the bills?
Yes.
Okay, so this one, they had a listing for field lister assessing clerk for February. They put at $225. They had an employment listing for administrative assistant, recreation department, March web ad for $225. They had one for administrative assistant, building land use department in March for $225. And this one says an employment listing on the website for a position of Director of Elder and Human Services, June web ad.
Okay, so it's a different.
That one also says web ad, but yeah, I don't know why they would charge less for this one, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it looks the same, right?
Yeah,
Maybe we got a multi-user discount or something.
No, I think the difference is the 225 is posted for 30 days, and the 150, when we hired Liz, we posted it for 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
that's a good reason. Thank
That's a
you,
good
Anthony.
reason. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Didn't know you were still here. Thank you.
Alicia, are these now part of the PO system you were implementing?
Yes, anything that's 500 or over. So if they know they're going to be doing MMA ads for more than $500, they should have a purchase order in place in HRS.
Right. If there's no more comments, I would look for a motion to recommend Article 3.
So moved.
Second,
Second,
Moved and seconded. I will do a roll call vote. All those in favor, Jerry,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Greg,
yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Al,
Yes.
Tyler,
yes.
and I'm a yes. Thank you. It's unanimous. Article 18.
18 is to fund collective bargaining agreements. There's still one union, and I doubt we're going to be done and ready by annual town meeting.
Right. If we are, we will vote on the floor.
Yes. Okay, the next one, we went over Article 20 already, and Article 21, which Steve Mark spoke to on their non-resident tuition revolving fund.
That is correct. I just want to refresh my memory for this one.
So this one, he said, is for the special needs students that have reached the age at year 22. They have to keep educating them, and since they already had an in-house program, they were able to take on other students from different districts.
Yeah.
And give them, charge them tuition to come over here, and it wouldn't affect our current student base at all.
I thought we voted to approve this already.
I think
Yeah, I thought so too.
I
Well,
thought
I had in my notes that forthcoming and to ask Steve, and then I didn't have afterwards in my notes that we actually voted it. So that's the only reason why I put it up.
I want to make sure we did. So let's just do it. We very well could have, but if that's the case, we're going to have.
Move we recommend Article 21.
All right.
Second,
Second, is there any further discussion? All right, I'll look for a roll call vote once again. Jerry,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Greg.
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Al,
Yes.
Tyler,
yes.
and I'm a yes. All right, thank you, Alicia. It's unanimous.
And thank you, Finance Committee. That's the end.
Phew.
What I have.
All right, do we have any public input out there? I don't have that view. So.
I don't see anyone raising their hand.
Okay, you see it? All right. Okay. Any updates that anyone wants to provide? Anything going on? No. I'll just mention. Let's talk real quick. So Monday, town meeting. I want to make sure I got it right. It is at 7. We are posted already. I noticed for 6:30. The only reason why I would say get there for 6:30 is if we do get that the CBA one comes in. And there's nothing wrong with getting there a little early before town meeting anyway, but I can make that decision right up to time of it and just say we don't need the meeting. We can close it immediately. So that's really all I have. And I won't worry about any minutes right now, but
Don't forget to post the meeting.
I believe it's posted.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Once again, thank you guys. Great informational debate, and I appreciate all of your input. And have a great week. Let's look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jerry,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Greg,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Al,
Yes.
Tyler,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. And thank you to all of our guests. And we'll see you guys next week. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.